Hello everyone and welcome to Fiction Friday. Today we have episode 22 of The Squire. I hope you enjoy it.
Rain tapped on the door before entering the austere cell where Michael tried to teach her to connect to the sword that was her birthright. 2 cushions sat on the floor and a light globe floated near the ceiling, giving off a dim white light. Michael hadn't arrived yet, which was a first. Rain sat on one of the cushions and closed her eyes. Maybe she could get in a little practice before he arrived. She took slow, deep breaths, tensing each muscle before relaxing it, and then focusing on the faint buzz in the back of her mind. Michael said that buzz represented the sword reaching out to her, the last of her line. The sword wanted to connect with her. All she needed to do was open herself to it. She understood all the words, and even the concept, but creating the correct frame of mind eluded her. The muscle of her calf relaxed an instant before the door opened and Michael entered. She opened her eyes and started to stand, but he waved her back to her seat. "My apologies for my late arrival. The Queen received a message from Cole. It seems he's finished training the first resistance group and moved on to search for the next." "So he's okay?" Rain tried to keep the anxiety from her voice and failed miserably. Ever since he left, she'd worried about what might happen to the Squire. He seemed far too young to be in charge of training others to fight beastmen, but it sounded like he was doing all right, which was more than she could say for herself. Michael smiled. "He's fine. Her Majesty says he sounded quite optimistic about his progress. Are you ready to begin today's lesson?" She took a breath and let it out. "Ready as I'll ever be." He patted her shoulder and sat on the cushion opposite her. "It's all right. This is a difficult process for someone not used to it. It took me 3 years before I managed to channel the light for the first time. You've only been practicing for 6 weeks. "How old were you?" 8. Now enough about me, let's begin. Close your eyes and feel the connection. The little buzz in the back of your head. Picture a door in your mind. Open it and invite the presence in." Rain did as he bid. She pictured a door, a dark-stained oak door that opened into her old room in Castle Finegold. She pushed it open and held out her arms. "Come to me." In her imagination, Cole stepped through the door and into her open arms. He held her, and she felt certain everything would be okay. She blinked. Damn it! That wasn't what Michael wanted her to picture. He must have seen she was having trouble, for he said, "It's all right. Try again." She closed her eyes and, without even being aware of it, reached for the amulet Cole had given her before he left. Instead of focusing on the door and her connection to the sword, she remembered her final conversation with Cole. She stood outside his door trying to work up the nerve to knock, which was stupid. It wasn't like she found him intimidating. She gritted her teeth and knocked. A few seconds later, he opened the door. She said, "So you're leaving?" He nodded. "It's time. Nobody's tried to kill me in a couple weeks and I'm getting bored." She laughed, then sniffed back tears. It was just like him to make a joke to put her at ease. "I'll be all alone." "You'll be fine. I've seen you with the other nobles. You're natural. Queen Talia seems to like you." "I'm just good at the game." She brushed past him and sat on his little bed, not much more than a cot, really. "So this is where they stuck you. This whole room would fit in the sitting room of the suite they gave me." "It's not bad." Cole sat beside her and her cheeks warmed. She thought about him almost nonstop since he saved her from Callion. "If you'd seen the shack I grew up in, you'd realize this is luxury living for me." "What's bothering you, Princess?" "I talked to Michael this morning about the training he wants me to do. There's magic and resonance and all sorts of things I don't understand. I'm not sure if I can do it." "You can do it. Have faith in yourself. Remember, they'll train you. No one expects you to know this stuff at the start. You're smart. And if you give it your best, I'm sure you'll do great." She leaned against him and Cole put an arm around her. By the light, that felt good. They sat that way for a while, not talking. Finally, Rain said, "Thanks. I needed a pep talk." "Sure." He reached under his tunic, pulled out his bronze Squire's amulet and handed it to her. "Take this. I remember when Sir Garrus gave it to me after 2 years serving as a page. He said, 'There's no going back. Your real training begins now." I was so excited, and at the same time terrified I would disappoint the man that saved me from a life on the streets. "I don't know what your training will be like, but remember, as long as you do your best, you won't let anyone down." She slipped the amulet over her head, buried her face in his shoulder, and cried like a little girl. When she got herself under control, he smiled and asked, "Better?" "Much, thanks." Cole squeezed her shoulder. "Any time, Princess." He'd sailed away a few hours later, and ever since, she thought about him more than when he had been with her. Cole followed the Beastmen and their prisoners for 3 days before they reached their destination, a group of crude makeshift pens made from rough-cut tree trunks filled with filthy, half-starved humans. Even from a distance, the stink from the pens made his eyes water. The monsters led their captives down the road like they owned it, and without anything resembling an army to oppose them, he guessed they did. Cole circled around through the woods until he reached the top of a little hill overlooking the pens. 5 of the rough wooden pens filled a hayfield that now resembled a mud pit. 3 of them looked full. He made a quick count and guessed each pen held 100 humans. The beastmen he'd followed led their prisoners to a half-full pen and shoved them inside. The slavers approached a saber-fang that appeared to be in charge of the guards, and after a brief exchange marched out the same way they'd entered. Cole shook his head. What the hell were they doing? In all his studies and limited experience, he'd never seen or heard of beastmen doing anything like this. On the far side of the camp, another trail led west toward the mountains. He snuck through the forest, alert for any guards. He didn't meet any. They all focused on the pens and the humans inside. They didn't appear concerned about an attack from outside. He studied the trail from the edge of the trees. It looked like an army had marched through, though he suspected that hundreds of slaves had stomped the grass flat. The trail led to the mountains, and the beastmen had villages up that way, or so he'd heard. No one had ever dared venture that far out of civilized country. The life expectancy of a human in beastman territory was vanishingly brief. There didn't seem to be anything more he could learn here. Cole retreated deeper into the woods. The castle wasn't far from the slave pens. The refugees might tell him something about the beastmen's plans. Even if they didn't know anything, he wanted to check in, make sure everyone was okay. He turned away from the pens and headed toward the castle. No matter what happened, he would find a way to help those people. Cole reached the castle before dark. The portcullis was down and there was no sign of movement. The keep looked deserted. He frowned. No way would they have abandoned a secure position like this, and he saw no signs of battle, so the beastmen hadn't forced them to flee. Maybe a guard hid out of sight. "Ged? Mara? Anyone here?" Something clattered a moment before 2 men in mail and carrying familiar crossbows stepped out from their hiding place.
"Who the hell are you, and how do you know the boss and his wife?"
Cole grinned. He knew that voice. "Is that any way to speak to the man that bandaged up your brother?" Hal stepped closer.
"By the light! We never thought to see you again, Cole. As a friend, open the gate."
A minute later, Cole ducked under the portcullis and into the yard. He'd barely taken 2 steps when the gate clanged shut. They walked toward the keep.
"Ged sure will be surprised to see you. How's your sister?"
"Rain's fine. We made it to Celestia and she found a job at court."
"That's good. It meant the world to my brother to have her sit with him at the end."
Hal led Cole away from the main gate. It appeared they used one of the servants' entrances. "You don't use the main gate?"
"No. Ged said it would be better to make the keep look empty to keep any curious beastmen away. Since we're still alive, I guess it's working."
"Looks that way." They reached the door and Hal rapped on it. A viewport opened and a pair of blue eyes stared out.
"Fetch the boss. We got a visitor."
The viewport slammed shut and the door opened. Hal motioned Cole inside.
"I've got to get back to my post. See you later."
Cole nodded and stepped inside. The little room behind the door had 2 hard-backed chairs and a door leading deeper into the castle. The man with the blue eyes pointed to the chairs and stomped off, presumably to fetch Ged. It would have saved time to let Cole come with him, but he probably had orders not to let anyone deeper into the castle without permission. The man carried his axe slung over his shoulder like someone used to chopping wood, not flesh, and Cole suspected if he wanted to get through, the guard wouldn't provide much of an obstacle. After his long hike, even the hard wooden chair made a welcome resting place. Cole sat in one chair and put his feet up on the other. Ged better hurry or he'd likely find him asleep. A few minutes later, the door opened and Cole sat up. Ged entered, saw Cole, and grinned.
Welcome back. I didn't figure we'd ever see you again. Where have you been? It's a long story. We need to talk and I can update your map. Good. We haven't added anything since you left. We seldom even send out scouts.
Ged led him out of the entry area and they headed toward the war room. Cole didn't need a guide. He'd made a point of exploring the place when they first arrived. They passed a few people on their way, some of whom Cole recognized, more that he didn't. It looked like they'd picked up a few new arrivals. So you don't know what's happening in the area? Ged shook his head.
We've tried to make this place look abandoned. The fewer people coming and going, the better. We send out hunters once a week to augment our food supply, but that's it.
What do they report?
Not much. At the first sign of beastmen, they head the other way. After that battle at the fort, no one's interested in attracting attention.
They reached the war room. Ged went in and lit a lantern. The map looked the same as Cole left it. He shouldn't be disappointed. These were farmers and fishermen mostly, not soldiers. He'd hoped they'd have some information about the area. Cole went to work, first putting a green pin to mark Pike's Cove as a friendly location. Next he marked all the skirmishes they'd fought. He finished up with a yellow flag for the slave pens, which indicated uncertainty as to its function. He stepped back and crossed his arms. There, now you know what I know.
No, I don't.
Ged looked at the map, then back at Cole.
What does it all mean? Tell me the truth. Who are you really?
Cole sighed. Rain was safe now, so he couldn't see any reason not to tell Ged the truth. I'm a squire, the last survivor of the Knights of Corinthia, at least as far as I know. That girl wasn't my sister, she was the princess, and my job was to get her out of the kingdom. I've returned to scout the beastmen's positions and train resistance groups. That green pin is Pike's Cove. It's the base of the first group I trained. Ged stared at him.
Why didn't you tell us the truth? Didn't you trust us?
It wasn't a matter of trust. If someone got captured and questioned, well, you can't reveal what you don't know. Since Rain's safe now, there's no reason not to tell you. Ged pointed at the yellow pin.
What's that mean?
I'd hoped you could tell me. Cole explained about the beastmen and the slave pens. None of the hunters mentioned them. I could smell them before I saw them, so if anyone got close, they'd have found it. Ged shook his head.
No one said anything to me. Even if they had, we would have kept our distance.
Cole nodded. Is it all right if I stay here tonight?
Sure, we've got plenty of room. How long will you be with us this time?
Depends. Do you want to stay in hiding, or do you want to join the fight?
That's not a question I can answer for everyone. I'll call a meeting tonight and tell you what we decide in the morning.
Fair enough. Do you want me to talk to them?
No, this has to be their decision.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Fiction Friday. If you liked what you heard, you can find more of my fiction on my website, jamesewisher.com. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with anyone else you think might enjoy the show. Until next week, goodbye.